Since the year 2013, when John Schoenheit finished the first edition, hard copy of the Revised English Version, it has gone through a metamorphosis. As in 2015, through a labor of love by our dearly beloved Rob Woods, the REV was put online and available for the whole world. John, tell us a little bit about that transition from working in binders and 3-hole punch binders and printed REV to the World Wide Web for the REV.
About the transition. It's a good thing it happened. I'm not a computer geek by any stretch of the imagination, and I couldn't envision it. And so I was kind of dragging my feet, and thankfully Rob, who's worked in computers for years and years and years, had a vision, and he went ahead and got it on the internet. And it was just, and once you see it, it's just so amazing, because you can make changes quickly, you can copy and email passages to each other and bless each other. That way there's so many things you can do, and you can electronically link the commentary right to the Bible. So instead of having a hard copy Bible like this and then a million notebooks, you know, that I've got hanging around, all these notebooks of, here's a notebook on Ephesians and notes, and here's a notebook on Philippians and notes. You know, you've got your commentary right there in the text. So it truly was a phenomenal metamorphosis and made the REV much more accessible, and of course in a lot of other places as well. Like now the REV is available anywhere anybody can get an internet signal or a cell phone signal or whatever, a data signal, so that they can go to the website and read it.
And I know one other big change was the printed REV was the New Testament. When it went online, we added the Old Testament at the same time and the online commentary as well. So now, working from an Old and New Testament, there's a complete Bible available for readers online.
There is a complete Bible, and basically the New Testament we've gone through, and now in some cases we're going through a second time, in some cases we're going through a third time, you know, because we keep learning things about the language, and we keep our ability to coordinate words and phrases becomes much more sophisticated. And of course we're on a march through the Old Testament as well. And we've done a good portion of the Old Testament, literally word by word. I mean, it's easy to read through the Old Testament like we did the original ASV and clean it up. But now we've been working in the Old Testament literally word by word out of the Hebrew text and Aramaic text for years now. It's just a superb translation. The REV at this point is a wonderful translation, and I would put it up against any translation on the market out there.
And that's a big change, though, from the first edition, wasn't it? Where it was not going through and just revising language and some problematic verses, but working on this now second edition, as we call it, it's actually a systematic verse-by-verse translation. And how has that affected the workflow and how things have progressed with the REV?
Well, it's made it a whole lot more accurate. For one thing, it's slower. I mean, it's decidedly slower. If you're reading through the English and saying this comma doesn't belong here and this ye should be a you, and we clean that up, and then some of the there's a lot of older English vocabulary and you clean that up, that moves fairly quickly. When you've got a Greek text in front of you, a Hebrew text in front of you, and you're trying to make sense of the verses, and then how do you bring that into English? Because the syntax of both Greek and English and Greek and English, Hebrew and English, the syntax is different. And so you can't take the word order of a Greek sentence and just bring it into English. It wouldn't make any sense. Yeah. And the same thing is true in Hebrew. So it's a lot slower, but it's also a lot more accurate. And it forces the translating team to look at all the words, all the phrases, and then okay, then you have a postulation, then you look to those words and phrases occur anywhere else. Is there similar context, similar syntax in other places? So it's a slower process, but a far more accurate process. So Jerry, another thing we've done with the REV, especially since the early days, 2002, 2003, is we've actually changed our translation methodology, the way we look at the text. When we started out, And this was just becoming more comfortable with translation, becoming more comfortable with the flexibility of language and moving one language to another language, the generating language to the receptor language. We began with a very wooden, very literal translation. The advantage of that, obviously, is it's very literal and very wooden. And the disadvantage is that you often can't understand it. And so we needed to move, and you'll see this in basically every modern version anyway. We moved to more of what's called an optimal equivalence. I believe that's the terminology. And that's really your field. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that the word for word helps to preserve grammatical structure of the original language, but when you're reading a translation, you don't really need those original grammatical structures. You need the receptor language, English. And so translating from another language into English, we started to prioritize more as we started learning how to best render the Greek, prioritizing the English syntax more, and also kind of like the English nuances. For one thing, like the genitive case, I've been a strong proponent that it's very helpful to try to translate what is the Greek genitive case trying to communicate, because it's so flexible. There's 20-some different meanings of the Greek genitive. And one that I remember is in Romans chapter 1, verse 6, where Paul writes and talks about being called of Jesus Christ. But in an English person reads, "You're called of Jesus Christ." They don't immediately grasp, I'm called of Christ. How? What? Where? When? Why? So to see that being the genitive is better rendered called to belong to Jesus Christ, in the sense like a genitive of possession, where you are called Christ's. Essentially, you belong to Christ. And that is a lot easier to grasp for the English reader. And like, what does it mean to be called of Christ?
God doesn't leave you with a bunch of questions.
Yeah. And I know there's some other places in the Old Testament. You were telling me some of the stuff you and Bill Schlegel have been doing recently.
We run into this all the time because the way the Hebrew used vocabulary, it's just actually, I've experienced this. I was raised in upstate New York and then moved to North Carolina. And I can remember instances where people would say something to me and I would be scratching my head going, what did they just say? And just a kind of a funny incident, I was buying groceries one time, and they've got the brown paper bags over here, and the lady looked at me, and there's only a few groceries, and she said, "Would you like these in a sack?" And I said, "No, one of those brown paper bags is fine," because to me a sack is different. Well, that's true in every language. So, for example, in the Hebrew words, the Hebrew typically uses the word find for what you and I would say just simply encounter or it would happen. So, for example, Samuel is talking to Saul and he says, when you go to this place, you will find 2 men. Well, Saul wasn't looking for them and he wasn't going to find them. He was going to meet them or he was going to encounter them. So there's an understanding of, okay, this is the way the Hebrew uses the word find, but if we bring it into English that way, it actually almost misinforms you, it misleads you. And I'll give you another example. In Proverbs, it says that if a man who commits adultery with a woman lacks, and then the Hebrew word is heart. He lacks heart. You're thinking, wow, if you commit adultery, you lack heart. We put that into our modern way of understanding and say the guy just doesn't have any heart. And that's not at all what it's saying, because in the Old Testament, they didn't know what the brain did. They understood the organ of the heart, but they didn't understand the organ of the brain. But so they used the word heart for thinking, and the word in the guts or the intestines for feeling. And that's why the Bible talks about bowels of mercy, feelings of mercy. But So the person who commits adultery with a woman, it's not that they lack heart like you and I mean it. They lack thinking. They're not using their brain. They're being stupid. And that's basically what the text is saying. So there are times when you can translate something literally and somebody says, well, this is a Hebrew word, you got to bring it in. It's like, no, if you do, you're misleading people. You've got to understand what the text is saying, and then that leads to your optimal equivalence. That, we're going to bring it into, the English and how you do that. The person who commits adultery with a woman isn't thinking well or something like that.
And I know we're also trying to retain some of the biblical kind of like flavor. So like I know we've decided to try to keep as many idioms as possible as would communicate. Like I know we decided that we wanted to keep the word walking, that idiom of walking, which isn't literally walking, it's figurative. It means you're living life. Mm-hmm. And so rather than saying living, we say walking, because that's what life is. Life is a journey. Mm-hmm. It's an excellent metaphor. So I know we've kept some of those as well, and some of the different coinage and weights and measures and things like that, so mm-hmm. that people, it's that we don't lose touch with the ancient world where the scriptures were originally written, but to try to find that balance between how much do you retain and how much do you let go of, and try to bring in more modern concepts and understanding. So that's the optimal equivalence that we're shooting for here in the second edition.
Yeah, and that's so important, because what we use, and when we translate, is if you can bring the idiom literally from the Greek or the Hebrew and the average American understands it anyway, mm-hmm. then you can leave it. But if you bring it over and it makes no sense, then like for example, our American idiom, that car will stop on a dime. Well, there's no dime, it's you just
no car.
Right, exactly. So the same thing. If the idiom doesn't make sense in English, if you bring it over literally, then we don't. And then we cover in commentary or a footnote, and that helps the reader.
So we've been on this journey in the second edition since about 2015. And in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit about the future of the REV going forward. So we'll see you then.